life safety director.
No, and that's yeah. I think we got a little bit off topic, but that's something we repeatedly talk amongst ourselves, and the casting is just amazing. I mean, that multiple actors, as we talked to them, and Nigel was talking about that, Vincent was talking about it, that the words just lend themselves to their performances, which repeatedly we heard that from multiple actors, and I do.
Well, they have to say that.
Yeah,
I guess
exactly.
If they want to work next year.
Yeah.
If they want scenes next year.
They better say that.
But it's just the writing is really, I would say. I mean, you guys are legends. You're doing Narcos is such a fantastic show, so it's not completely new for you. But this show is so relevant to everything that's happening right now, the world that we're living in right now. It's a mirror to that. Like, in history repeats itself. So fear of immigrants, fear of change, fear of people coming in and trying to take over, and white supremacy, so to say. Vincent's character Gigante does that, right? Because he's afraid of the change that's happening. So we see that right now, all of that, and so can you talk a little bit about that focus? And I'm assuming as conscious.
Yes, I mean, I'm so. It's so gratifying to hear you say that, and for you to recognize, even just from one episode, hey, this is about contemporary matters. First of all, there's no reason to spend the extra money to make everything 1960. Unless you're making a commentary about today.
Right.
Who cares about a love letter to the past unless it relates to the present? Right. So right from the beginning, as we looked at this show, we said, okay, hold on a second. In Harlem in '63, there was a heroin crisis. There was an opioid crisis. It was hitting primarily African American and Latinos in the neighborhood. But now we have an opioid crisis that touches this entire country.
Right.
White, black, in fact, more in rural white areas than in ghettos per se. We have police brutality creating very, very difficult, situations and social movements coming out of things like oppression and brutality that we would have thought, since we had an African American president, we've come so far. In some ways we've come so far, in some ways things are just the same. And I think what the show does is it allows us to examine contemporary issues through the safe distance of the past. So that, for instance, if we were doing this show about Harlem today and we were dealing with police brutality, it would all be too much in your face because that's what's going on in the world. But when you put it back in time, it makes it, first of all, you're taken as a viewer into a world. Like we really worked hard with the production design and to try to make
beautiful.
it feel like when you're in the show, you're going to a separate place that you want to see what's going on in this world. But then also, it's not going to mean anything. It's just going to be as unnutritious as popcorn unless there's something, unless there's something that makes you think about what's happening in our world today. So, for example, we have in one episode, Malcolm ends up confronting a Nazi, the head of the American Nazi Party, and he says, he says, you're a black supremacist, I'm a white supremacist, we're not so different. And so we wanted to examine it from different angles. And so, for instance, while we have police brutality, we also have cops in the show who are good and who aren't racist. So it's really about creating a blend that allows for a thoughtful examination of the world today.
Right.
Yeah, and for me, I'm always saying this is we're not doing documentary. We're doing historical fiction, and my hope is that particularly the youth watch this, get engaged, and get excited, and they go and Google who Adam Clayton Powell is, and they go buy Malcolm's autobiography, and they really take the time themselves to go inform themselves about history. I mean, we're both history buffs. We have degrees in history. There's obviously Narcos and other shows that we've done. It's all about looking at what has happened and see how it's related, how we can inform ourselves about the present, and hopefully gain a higher consciousness when it happens.
They said